the show. It's me, Phil Vischer. This is the Phil Vischer podcast for the week of August 17th. I'm here with Skye Jatani.
Hey, Phil.
Hi, Skye. And Christian Drew.
Yes.
You are Christian.
I am a Christian.
And you're Drew.
My name's Drew, and I'm filling in for Christian.
We remember Drew Dyck, our old friend Drew Dyck, this is your third time on the show?
Something like that.
Third or fourth, maybe. Third.
One question, how many times do I have to come on before I get a t-shirt?
I haven't gotten a t-shirt.
We don't have t-shirts.
Okay.
We have to make.
I'm throwing it out there.
The real question is how many times you have to come on before we go to the trouble of making t-shirts.
There you go.
And we need to do that. We'll do it. I got a request. My good friend Anthony has been requesting a voice for the theme song for more than a year now. And I was pretending that I actually didn't remember who the character was. So he sent me the link on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Said, go. It's a voice I actually did. I didn't even remember doing the voice. We once told the story of St. Patrick, whose real name was Maywin Suckett.
Excuse me?
Maywin Suckett.
I think you should apologize.
Sorry. He was carried away by pirates and sold as a slave. And his owner talked to him and told him to feed the pigs. And I did that voice. I didn't remember I did that voice. So this is Maywin Suckett's owner when he was a slave. And he talked like this because he was in Ireland. And he had a very high voice. He said, "Feed the pigs, big boy. Feed the pigs." So I'm supposed to do the theme song like this because Anthony's been asking for it for more than a year. So here goes. We'll see how this works. Probably not well. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. And landing here, the Phil Vischer podcast. I'm me Lucky Charms. Starts right here. We'll talk to Skye and Drew. Oh, I messed up your chord. That sounds terrible. We'll talk to Skye and Drew Dyck too. We don't have Christian here for you. Nor do we have Maywin Suckett, who later became St. Patrick. And we celebrate him every year on St. Patrick's Day. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
I think you should stop before you have an aneurysm.
So, Anthony, you don't have to ask me ever again to do the voice of Maywin Suckett's boss. Because I did it. The air.
Wow.
Once for all. All right.
You got to stop, man.
I can't.
If you could keep that up through the whole podcast, that'd be quite something.
I can't stop. I can't. Okay. Center. Okay.
Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow.
Yeah, the rutabaga.
Right.
And what's yours?
Mine's too long.
Rutabaga. We have to issue an apology. 2 weeks ago, we did a story on quotes from Michelle Bachmann that turned out to be not true. Not true. Did you hear about that, Drew?
I did.
Yeah. Because it was all over the news.
Right.
That's right.
Well,
yes.
The story that you pulled that we were talking about was reported by other news outlets.
Yes, it was.
As factual.
So here's what happened. I really want to go back to that character. But I shouldn't, especially not for an apology to a sitting member of the U.S. Representatives. So I get my news from a couple of sources, Religion News Service, some other news wires, and also from online aggregators like Yahoo News, which aggregates news stories from all over the web, from reputable sources. This was actually aggregated, I believe, from The New Yorker and came up in my Yahoo News feed, quotes of Michelle Bachmann talking about science and how she wasn't going to listen to scientists anymore because Stephen Hawking had admitted that he'd been wrong about something or other about black holes. And the quote was that Michelle Bachmann said, well, if scientists are wrong about black holes, they could also be wrong about things like global warming and evolution. Now, that did not strike me as something completely out of character for Michelle Bachmann, because she said similar-ish things, but it was clearly more extreme. My news feed did not label it as satirical, because Yahoo's little news bots that go around looking for stories apparently can't discern satire from real news, which is something I am now aware of and will keep in mind going forward. So we apologize to Michelle Bachmann. She did not say the things that we thought she said, and we retract everything we said from that segment.
And am I correct that her own office had to issue a statement telling people that those news reports were false? Not our podcast.
No, not because of our podcast. No. So other people saw the story. Other people also thought it was real news and not a satirical piece. Probably because so many people now get their news from aggregators as opposed to the original source, so you lose the context.
Well, and it's not, a lot of people, not just news bots, have a problem discerning between satire and reality. I wrote a piece last year that was satire that went out in my newsletter and on my blog.
Right, about smoking in your kids' elementary school.
Yeah, it was a cigarette thing, but it was actually a metaphor for the use of cell phones and digital technology in our schools, and a lot of people just did not pick up on that. Even my father, who's a fairly intelligent person, texted me the next morning going, "Get your kid out of that school. If they're smoking in English class, that's not right." So we're not...
Well, you don't have a track record of satire on your blog, so it caught people off guard. And was it April 1st?
No.
See, you didn't give anyone any clues. It was just like this piece from this guy who writes for The New Yorker. So it was a legitimate story. It was just a satirical story.
Right. So it's really his fault.
Yeah. So and some people got a little crabby with us and said, "You're not doing good journalism if you don't check out your stories." And I just had to point out, I'm not doing journalism at all. I'm doing commentary, and there's a difference.
And sometimes even that's questionable.
And even that is, yeah. So if you're doing journalism, you are collecting news and verifying news and then delivering news. If you're doing commentary, you're commenting on news that other people are delivering to you. And we have a limited budget for actually checking to the people that are delivering us news, or the bots, the online bots that are delivering us news. But we'll try to do better. And we apologize to Michelle Bachmann. You didn't say those things. You're a very nice person. But you know what? She's not related. If you're from the Minneapolis area, you know Bachmann florists.
I'm neither from...
I know. But if you're from Canada, that's close to Minnesota.
That's true.
Do you know
They're kind of honorary Canadians.
Yes. So people in Minneapolis get their flowers from Bachmann florists, which is the family that was related to the coach of the U.S. women's volleyball team or men's volleyball team in the China Olympics.
2008?
Yes, where the parents were murdered while they were over there.
What? Who?
Don't you remember that?
No.
Oh. The in-laws of the head coach of the U.S. Olympic team were killed in China, in Beijing, by a crazy guy with a knife who attacked them at a tourist site.
Wow.
And the question was
they were both killed?
Yes.
Wow.
That got dark quick.
Yeah, it did.
From flowers to...
I know.
Yeah, the point is that's the Bachmann family of the florists, which I thought was related to the Bachmann family of the Michelle Bachmann, and I found out it's not.
There's more than one Bachmann?
So there's multiple strains of Bachmann in Minneapolis. Can you believe it?
There's multiple strains of botulism, which kind of sounds like Bachmann. Why do I care about that whole little segment there?
I thought that was
it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Drew thought it was interesting.
So.
He's a guest.
He's just more likely to butter me up because he's a guest.
Bingo.
And you can't not be invited back.
Well, I guess I could.
Theoretically, but probably not. It was a bad week for a couple of prominent Christians. Did you know that? Only two. And I'm not talking about the doctors who got Ebola in Africa.
Well, I think it was probably a pretty bad week for a lot of Christians in Iraq, too.
Yeah, it was, it was a bad week for a lot of Christians, but I'm going to single out two. And the two I'm going to single out are Mark Driscoll and Michael Gungor. Do you know either of those two?
Drew, what's my policy?
Oh, one of them doesn't exist in Skye's world.
Yeah.
You don't like Michael Gungor?
No.
You don't like music? Okay. Pastor Mark Driscoll's books withdrawn from 180 Christian bookstores. Books by megachurch pastor Mark.
I think the real news here is that there's still 180 Christian bookstores.
Well, that's
that's heartening.
That's the Lifeway chain.
I know.
Books by megachurch pastor Mark Driscoll have been pulled from 180 Christian stores. Lifeway stores have temporarily suspended sales of his books. Driscoll, if you don't know who he is, founded Seattle's Mars Hill Church in 1996. It has grown to a reported 13,000 attendees at 15 locations. It's known for its charismatic pastor, big screen sermons.
That's charismatic, lowercase c.
Festive atmosphere, festive lower f, and loud music. Because uppercase F on festive is...
It's very pagan.
That means Renaissance fair. That's what that means.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's uppercase, capital
that
F,
makes sense.
festive. Last week, the church network Acts 29 dismissed Mars Hill Church and Driscoll from its group. Driscoll was a co-founder of Acts 29, which has helped create 500 churches around the world. The Seattle Times report that Acts 29's decisions to dismiss Driscoll came after a string of allegations that he regularly bullied or shunned churchgoers and spent church funds inappropriately. The church reportedly paid a marketing company more than $200,000 to boost sales of one of Mark Driscoll's books. Another one of his books was accused of plagiarism. And this was the more recent news that in 2000, Driscoll created a false identity to post misogynistic and homophobic rants online, including one describing Christian men as promise-keeping, homoerotic, worship-loving, mama's boy, sensitive, emasculated, neutered, exact male replica, Evangelicists.
Hey, if the shoe fits.
That's like my bio.
I went to a Promise Keepers rally once, but I didn't cry. I did not cry.
But your
Did you
studio.
sway?
But I think I am an Evangelifish.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
going to say. You're big on the
Jellyfish Labs.
jellyfish
Yeah.
thing. Is
So-
Evangelicists. I think
He
we
got
need
you,
to
man.
we need to trademark that .com, right?
Yeah. He still has supporters, though. Religious news service, one writer said, when Christians have grown so bitter towards someone that we can't even accept their apologies, something has gone seriously wrong.
That was Jonathan Merritt, I believe, who
Was
said
it?
that. I think so.
A friend?
Yeah, he was encouraging people to forgive.
Even though he's been one of the most vocal critics of Driscoll. But when
So-
Driscoll did apologize, he said, let's forgive
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. So when here's because there are a couple of things in here. For one, there's something that you've commented on a lot of celebrity culture in the evangelical world. We love celebrity pastors. We build them up and they fall down. We build them up and they fall down.
It's like playing with a 2-year-old.
What?
You know, you build the blocks, they knock them down. You build
Yeah.
the blocks, and it's
Okay,
just,
so
it's
it's-
just evangelicalism is kind of it.
Is the pastor the 2-year-old or is the pastor the blocks?
I think
No, the pastor's the blocks.
The pastor's the
evangelicalism is the
Is the
2-year-old.
two-year-old.
toddler.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
there you
Okay.
go.
Glad
That
we
makes sense.
got that figured out.
It's not a perfect analogy, but
It's not but it's the best one we have
Yeah.
at the moment. Do you think it's interesting because some of the commentators have said typically when a megachurch pastor falls, it has something to do with morality or sexuality. This is very different. It's kind of how the church was being run and some financial stuff that wasn't really there. I mean, nothing illegal happened.
Well, I think there were some former staff people who were going to bring a lawsuit that they've postponed.
That doesn't mean anything illegal happened.
Right.
but yeah,
It's
nothing
it's an
definitively illegal
Yeah,
has happened.
So do you agree with Acts 29 doing what they did and saying we can no longer be associated with you? Because what they've done is requested that he take time off.
That he stepped down. Yeah.
And seek counsel. And
I don't know. I mean, Drew and I have talked about this a little bit in the office. For those of you who we've never really introduced him on this podcast, Drew is the managing editor of Leadership Journal. His office is right next to mine over
Yeah.
at Christianity Today. So we, it's water cooler kind of conversation about what's going on, and I don't think any of us outside of these organizations really know what's going on behind the scene and
but
what
we can pretend we do.
Well, that
Just
right.
like me with Michelle Bachmann.
Yeah, so I think we get in a little bit of speculation, but the part I can't quite grasp is there hasn't been anything that shocking that has come out about Mark Driscoll in the last 6 months that we didn't know about him 5 years ago. And that's why it's a little bit weird that everyone's kind of running to the hills now and trying to disassociate from him when there's qualities here that have been very obvious for a long time that actually were celebrated by some people for a long time.
Well, Acts 29 Network said that basically they had lost faith in the internal committee at Mars Hill at the job they were doing to investigate these things.
Right.
So it was, we're waiting. We can't wait any longer.
And one of the members of this board, I forget what it's called, the board that they. So Mars Hill has an interesting polity. Most churches have a board of elders or deacons or leaders who are comprised of people from within the congregation,
Right.
who oversee the ministry and hold staff and pastors accountable. Mars Hill has an interesting deal where their board is actually all external people. people who don't attend the church, other
That
pastors.
seems weird.
So one of these board members, I think his name was Paul Tripp, if I'm recalling
that's right.
correctly. He resigned from the board earlier this summer, and this week he came out with a statement saying the reason he resigned is because this kind of board is incapable of truly bringing the kind of accountability and restoration that is necessary. It really needs to be an internally comprised board. So I think the news was kind of leaking out that this board that is supposed to be helping Mark,
It's not working.
it may not be working, and that news apparently has gotten back to Acts 29, and so they're kind of throwing in the towel here.
And this is apparently a common thing now where these large churches will have elders comprised of outside people.
Right.
And usually other megachurch pastors.
Who are friends with the senior pastor.
Exactly. So they're all buddies, and they set each other's salaries, which to me seems problematic. It's like, oh, you're going to give me $1 million a year? I'll give you $1 million too.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true of Mars Hill, but there are
Yeah.
other churches that we have reported on where they have this kind of structure where the people in the church, the congregation, don't even know how much money their pastor is being paid because
Right.
there's no
Yeah.
transparency because it's set by this outside. So it gets kind of hinky where you wonder.
Yeah, it is a little hinky. There was a piece written on this on thevergenetwork.com, which said, talking about people's thirst for justice, and said the justice that many wanted was that Mark Driscoll would be tarred and feathered, made to experience the hurt he caused, and then resign from ministry altogether. Is that really justice? Maybe in American terms, but it's not in Christian terms. The best case scenario, and this is one person writing, would be for Mark to take a leave of absence, meet with people face to face or with a mediator to resolve conflict, to repent and be restored to full-time ministry as a result of the process. That sounds Christian, but here's a question. With a pastor, do you ever say, okay, what we're observing means there's character stuff going on where you shouldn't just be, and I'm not saying this is the case with Mark Driscoll, but when do you say, okay, he apologized, put him back in the pulpit, put him back in the ministry, and when do you say, okay, he apologized, but there's deeper stuff, he should really probably not be in that role for 2-3 years, until we see more maturity. When can a pastor just apologize and everyone says, okay, that's fine, no harm, no foul? And when does a pastor actually need to say, no, you need to step down for a while?
That's a fuzzy line. It's tough. And especially, like
Several
you mentioned,
fuzzy lines.
this is a unique case because usually in the evangelical world, the big red line is sexual immorality. Right. So, and it's tragically funny when people say, finally, this guy had an affair and he's fallen. Oh my goodness, Satan took him out. And for years, maybe he's been a total jerk. Okay. And I'd say morally, he's fallen a long time ago.
Right.
And then it's just when they do that, they cross that red line that they get taken out. Now, Driscoll's case is unique because evidently, that we know of, he hasn't done any of those things. But it's almost this cumulative effect of some arrogance, kind of hierarchical practice of leadership, saying brash and inappropriate things.
So do you think in that kind of case you can say, if you go around and apologize to everyone, it's kind of like grade school.
Sure, yeah.
You need to go to your friends and go to your teacher and apologize for what you did, and then everything is okay.
I think, like grade school, you still need a timeout. I think Driscoll needs a timeout. I do. I agree with Acts 29's assessment. Hey, step down. And I think just from a PR standpoint, this would be the best thing for his ministry at this point and his church. Take some, even a couple of years off. Have a comeback tour later, whatever. But take some time out, soul searching, get some good advice, some counseling, because I think what really broke the camel's back here was when people saw William Wallace II. This is the code name he used on a blog to anonymously post these comments. They were incredibly misogynistic and homophobic, whatever.
I couldn't even read them.
I know,
on the
exactly.
podcast.
This was tough stuff. And
but
it
they're
just
also
reveals
14 years old, these comments.
Yeah,
that's true, but he wasn't a kid. He was 31.
He wasn't 18.
I'm not justifying them, but
and he was a senior pastor.
I think the
at the time, he was a senior pastor.
But that's what I mean is Mark. There's nothing that's remarkably new that suddenly come to light that people didn't know about him. He talked openly about those comments.
Yeah,
but,
I think more
he
people
just
know
revealed
about
them
it
in a
now.
book.
Right.
Not terribly.
So
terribly
it isn't like the typical pastor scandal where there's this duplicity where on the outside he looks one way, but deep in a dark closet in his life there's this terrible stuff going on. Most of what people are criticizing Mark for are things that he's been very transparent about.
He's an aggressive male.
Yeah, and
He
he's
seems to have a lot of testosterone.
Yeah, well, he's got issues with women. I'm just going to go out on a limb here.
I don't even want to speculate.
Okay, I'm not. Well,
Here's to
Well,
back
after
away.
reading some of the William Wallace comments.
yeah.
To back
It's
away-
not a Twitter handle yet.
To
Anyway.
back away from Driscoll and look at
Okay.
this more broadly.
Yes, let's look
I
at-
think what's kind of fascinating about this is typically in ministry, when there's a pastor with some kind of disciplinary issue, whatever it may be, it's handled by his local church. Right?
Right.
By the elders, by whoever's in authority in the local church, by the congregation, by the denomination, by the superintendent, the bishop, whoever. But this is a case where anyone and everybody, it seems like they have a right to step in and voice their opinion about what should happen to Mark Driscoll, whether
Yeah,
it's a
'cause
church
he's a
planting network.
celebrity.
Exactly, and that's where it gets.
But he's also a celebrity pastor with no denominational oversight.
Right. So
Which
here,
is true of almost all celebrity pastors.
here's the dual
Sure.
the dual dilemma of evangelicalism. So many of our churches have no accountability structure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have there's no one above Mark in the structure to really hold him accountable, or in many other churches as well. But secondly, we give these people, these celebrity pastors, so much influence over
Yeah.
the broader church because of publishing and media and conferences, that so many of us have been impacted by their ministry that when they fall or there's a problem, we all feel like we have a right, because it's essentially, this is our pastor, even though he's on the other side of the country and we've never seen him before live. He's my pastor. I have a right then to be angry.
I demand justice.
And demand justice. And I just think that whole thing is really weird and messed
Well,
up.
even Jonathan Merritt's article, which I agreed with, he was saying basically we should forgive Mark Driscoll, and I went, I'm not going to forgive Driscoll. Neither am I going to withhold forgiveness. He's done nothing against me. You know, it just seems surreal.
You think
That's
but
true.
he does things
it may
under
come
false
out.
names.
There you go. So it may come out that he has been doing
that
things
high
against
school
me.
girlfriend that
Yeah.
dumped you.
That was Driscoll's
That might
fault.
have been Mark Driscoll.
That was probably a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll have
So-
to thank him. But I mean, forgive. You're right. But there's this kind of sense that we all get to weigh in
well, and
because he is a celebrity pastor.
Right.
as I've thought about it, I think there's thinking about our audience who may be hearing this, or maybe people are familiar with Mark or have been fans of his books or his podcasts or preaching. What do you do with this? And the immediate thing that comes to my mind is, first, of course, pray for Mark and his family, who are at the
Yeah.
epicenter of this, and that cannot be an easy thing. Secondly, pray for the church, for Mars Hill, his church, that the
Right.
people there and the leaders there would have wisdom and discernment to know how to navigate all this for the sake of the sheep in that congregation and the mission of that congregation. But then third, and this speaks more to people kind of in our positions, Drew, you and me, and maybe even Phil to a degree. Those of
But
us,
probably not.
those of us who have some authority in areas like book publishing, magazines, conferences, those who are the gatekeepers to who gets to that celebrity posture, we need to be much more discerning and careful about who we thrust into that spotlight.
Right.
And even if there aren't denominational structures to make sure immature or unhealthy people aren't in those places, we don't have that as
I
evangelicals.
just grabbed Drew Dyck off the street and gave him a microphone and put him on my podcast.
Nice vetting process.
Honestly, it's been rather disturbing. I've talked to some conference leaders, and a lot of them don't really think about those issues very much when
Yeah.
they're selecting speakers. They're
Right.
only thinking about who's going to draw a crowd.
How big is your church? You know, whatever.
And same thing with publishing. It isn't how mature is this person, how godly, how accountable are they. It's how big a platform do they have that we can sell books for.
Is in American celebrity culture, because that's not just true within the American
Right.
church, it's the entire American culture. Is it even possible that could change?
Yeah, that's really countercultural.
It is countercultural, but I would hope
Are you
that
saying the church is supposed to be countercultural?
isn't that
Kinda crazy idea
I
is
know
that,
it's
yeah.
just nuts. But yes, I would hope, and I know that there are many godly, wonderful, influential leaders in the church who don't mishandle their celebrity. But we do need to do a
Young?
much.
Is that part of the problem?
Part of it is
I get nervous about 30-year-old megachurch pastors. It just seems like
Well, yeah,
you
and
haven't-
Driscoll isn't that young, but he
No,
he
but he
was when
was.
he
He
became
was.
a huge success, right?
Very young.
Yeah,
right. And so Justin Bieber.
Yeah, I know.
If we haven't learned anything,
he
from
hasn't done anything
Justin
wrong
Bieber-
yet, but don't hold your breath, right?
Okay.
He's Canadian, so I had to,
What?
protect my fellow Canadian.
Yeah. Drew
He hasn't broken any Canadian
Drew is our
laws.
token Canadian. It's Diversity Week on the podcast.
That's right.
So we have a token Canadian here.
Representing.
And half an Indian.
Hey.
We have half an Indian.
have to give another apology
And you're
next
half
week.
a Swede, and I'm a quarter of a Swede. So we have half an Indian and 3/4 of a Swede.
I'm actually only about quarter Swedish.
Oh.
I got
So we only have half a Swede. We have half an Indian and half a Swede
I got
between
some
us.
Norwegian.
It's like the
and
UN right
Danish
here.
I got
in
some
me, too.
German.
I got some Danish in me. But
And
that
what are you?
That was
Because
just
Canadian
breakfast.
isn't a real thing
Hey.
unless you're a First Nations people.
Come on.
Are you-
Jesus was Canadian.
What are you talking about?
Little known fact. I won't try to defend it.
That's pretty much Canadian philosophy. We won't try to defend it.
That's right.
Or
We're
explain
peace
it?
loving.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I think there's some German in there. There's some.
Okay, that's fine. Second Christian who isn't having a great day, Michael Gungor. If you know the group Gungor, it's Michael and his wife. His wife is named Lisa.
I saw them in concert.
Did you?
Yeah.
They're good.
They're very good.
I actually listen to their stuff
I
all
do too.
the time. It's very
I
extraordinarily.
don't listen to much Christian music.
They don't call their music Christian. They call it liturgical.
Well, whatever they call it, I don't
Yeah.
listen to stuff that's typically associated with Christian music all that much. I do
Right.
listen to some, and they're one of the few.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just declaring that up
What
front.
about you, Drew? Do you listen to Christian music?
I don't listen to much music at all.
Really?
Isn't that weird?
I can tell.
I'm more of a singer.
What?
I sing to myself.
Oh, but
yeah.
what music do you sing? Mostly old show tunes? What are we going to learn about?
Yeah, whatever comes to me. man.
Canadian spirituals.
That's right. Yes.
What was Mark
They're
Driscoll's
haunting.
quote about some men?
They're haunting.
Whoa.
Show tune singing.
Yeah, that one go with
Canadian.
Driscoll.
I think
Yeah.
Canadian goes right in there.
Exactly. Canadians. Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
suspect.
Okay, this week,
Okay.
now this is a story as reported in Relevant Magazine. This week, many Christians got all riled up over something a well-known Christian figure said. This feels familiar. Michael Gungor and his wife Lisa, both of the worship band Gungor, came under fire for statements they made. Do you know if it's Gungor or Gungor? Because Gungor.
We had a discussion about this. I
I don't know, but you know,
Okay.
honestly, what's been going through my head ever since I read this story?
What?
It's Shark Week
Yeah.
right now
Yeah.
on the Discovery Channel, and I just keep thinking Gungor, 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 Gungor. It sounds like it should
You're
go
right.
right with that tune.
Yeah.
Is that a
okay.
show tune?
Well, you keep doing that. Okay. Well, we discussed.
That's a scary story, so it's appropriate.
Yes, came under fire for statements they made about creationism and the Genesis account of the flood. In the post that they wrote, they said, or Michael Gungor said, I have no more ability to believe, for example, that the first people on earth were a couple named Adam and Eve that lived 6,000 years ago. I have no ability to believe there was a flood that covered all the highest mountains of the world only 4,000 years ago, and that all the animal species that exist today are here because they were carried on an ark that somehow walked or flew all around the world from a mountain in the Middle East after the water dried up.
Have you verified this story?
I've got like 3 different copies of it from different magazines.
All right, just making
I,
sure.
I feel
They
like
could all be wrong, but
I feel like I'm good. Okay, so that was the story. Now that led to some backlash or backwash if you were on the ark. That was when
a flood of controversy, if you
when
will.
Noah opened the door too soon. He got backwash.
That's where backwash came from.
Yes.
Okay.
So there was
Yeah.
backlash. There was a story in World Magazine which got picked up on the internets and showed up everywhere. It was not a satire. They were really mad at them. They've lost concert gigs now. They've had 3, I believe, Southern Baptist churches cancel concerts that they were coming to attend. At one point, they thought Lifeway was dropping them and then found out that that was a rumor.
Lifeway's dropping
I
people
know.
like flies now.
Land
aren't
in the
they?
Driscoll heap.
Yeah.
Land in the Driscoll heap. Is that like a compost pile?
The Driscoll heap.
So
catchy.
Michael Gungor responded by writing a blog post on his website, which I'm not sure helped very much. So here's some quotes from his.
It was a very long post.
It was a very long
Yeah.
post. Here's some quotes.
Usually when you're answering a critic, the shorter the better.
Short,
Be
short.
short. Be short.
Short.
Long is never going to be good.
Yeah, but he's not that. He's like 30, 35. He's not.
What does that have to do with anything?
Michael Gungor? Well, he hasn't gone through this before.
Oh.
I'm just saying he hasn't.
He's new to the process.
And they've been popular for 2 years, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so they don't
Yeah.
have much. The mantle of celebrity is heavy. That's what I'm saying.
I found that to be true in my life.
Yes,
Some
that's
of the
true.
best advice I got, and I shouldn't name the source because that will get
Yeah.
me in trouble, but about being criticized.
Justin Bieber?
No. It was somebody in ministry who was heavily criticized, public figure, and he said to me, when people throw mud at you,
Yeah.
if you try to
Make pancakes?
no, if you try to get it off,
not the lemon
if you
thing.
try to get it off, you just end up making a bigger mess. He said, just let the mud sit.
Wear it with pride.
Just wear it, and it'll dry, and then it'll just fall off.
Just flake
by
it off.
itself.
Really?
Yeah. But if you knee-jerk respond, try to get out,
Yeah.
you just make a bigger mess. And there's some wisdom in that, I think.
What if you throw mud back?
Ooh.
Does that help? Because then if everyone's muddy, then no one can tell who's muddy.
Well, that's like cable news. That's their philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't done.
Sorry.
So he responded in his blog post and said, let's get down to it, shall we? Do I believe God exists? Yes. Do I believe Jesus is the Son of God? Yes. Do I believe that Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness? Yes. Do I believe that God literally drowned every living creature 5,000 years ago in a global flood except the ones who were living in a big boat? No, I don't. Why don't I? Because of science and rational thought. Now, that's not going to go over well.
Yeah.
Because
Obviously, he didn't see the movie.
he says, with archaeology, DNA evidence, and common sense, we can prove that all human beings did not come from two individuals 6,000 years ago. We can prove these things beyond a reasonable doubt with science. That's like throwing red meat at, he's going to have so many people coming back because there are whole teams of people that are just trying to work out how you respond to issues like that. It's the Answers in Genesis crowd, but there are other guys, in multiple countries that basically the focus of their ministry is saying, how was the ark possible exactly as written in the Old Testament? Let's figure out how you could put that many animals. How much fresh water would you need? People have done all that math and tried to figure out ways to do
Right.
it. So just by saying, come on,
He's essentially calling those people who disagree with him stupid.
kind of a little
And that's
bit.
not really going to go over
And he
well.
knows that they're wrong because of science and rational thought. I kind of wanted to take him aside and say, Michael, this is not...
Michael, we've talked to these people before.
It's not
going to go over
going to
well.
end well. He says, I would be very surprised to find a single respected and educated theologian or biblical scholar that believes that one must read Noah's flood completely literally down to the last detail to be orthodox. That's crazy. So he says, so why do people get so bent out of shape?
So now they're stupid and crazy.
Why does this happen? And then he says, this is his central question. Why do some fundamentalists create this dichotomy where you must either believe the Bible, meaning that you take everything literally no matter what science says, or say that it's a lie? And his conclusion is that it's not. He's really going out kind of on a limb here and coming up with original thinking, trying to solve this whole problem. Basically says it's social. It's social.
He's an external processor, isn't he? Yeah.
Apparently. So he says we have huddles. We make huddles, and we want to know who's in our huddle and who's outside of our huddle and what are the things that make our huddle special. So these boundary markers can be things like we don't dance, or we don't play cards, or we don't drink alcohol, or we believe there was a literal naked couple in a garden 6,000 years ago. So he goes on, and he's partly, I think, you're just digging yourself in deeper.
I think they need to hire you as a consultant.
God
Phil.
bless you, but you should probably be quiet now. So what's happening here is some people thought Gungor was in their huddle, and now we are displaying some signs that we may not be, and they are freaked out a little bit by it. We might be one of them, quote unquote, and if we were one of the outsiders, the dangerous worldly people who threaten to tear apart the huddle, how can they know they are safe? But listen, and now he's preaching to the huddle people. This is an ambitious blog post, really. But listen, huddle people, I'm for you. I really am, and I'm with you. I was raised in the huddle. Some of the best people I know are in the huddle. But you don't need to be so afraid. You don't need to repress your intellectual ability to ask questions and seek truth in order to stay in the shadow of the huddle. Because let me tell you something, there is light outside. In fact, God is both inside and outside of your huddle.
It's like a Braveheart speech.
Wow.
Then he yelled freedom, and he
Freedom.
breathed his last.
So
I didn't really disagree with what he was saying. I mean,
You know what? Okay, the world piece.
are you in the huddle?
Which huddle?
I think he just might be in the shadow of the huddle. Yeah. So, no, I get this, right? A lot of young people are essentially saying this. I don't want to choose between science or mainstream science and my Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think the tent, I'm going to go out on a limb here, I think the tent of orthodoxy is big enough to encompass people who don't buy into a 6-day literal creation narrative, okay?
Yeah.
I actually don't think that was that's going to cause a lot of problems for me, you're right. But the World Peace reported on this thing they did with the liturgists.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's this sort of liturgy that, in my opinion, this is what kind of, rubbed me the wrong way, is it's almost a celebration of doubt. So they have popular blogger Rachel Held Evans on there saying, what if God doesn't exist and we just made him up because we're scared? And so I think that kind of stuff.
And Rob Bell.
And stuff. So you get these kind of
it's guilt by
progressive,
association.
Sure. Progressive young evangelicals airing their doubts, which is fine. Because, I talked to a lot of young people that had left the faith for my first book.
I'm ready.
Ding.
I'm ready.
Okay.
No, you got to name the book.
Name the book. Generation X Christian. And that was actually one of the things that came up repeatedly. They said that no one allowed them any space to express their doubts. And that's toxic for someone's faith if you don't allow that space.
Right.
So that's a good thing. And yet, what I see with this next set of younger evangelicals is almost a fetishizing of doubt, if you will. I think I just coined that term.
I like it.
Like it.
Is that capital F?
Yes, absolutely.
Because if it's capital, it's a whole different thing.
That's a whole different thing.
So, if I say I doubt your fetish, is that different than saying I fetishize your doubt?
Totally different.
Okay.
That changed everything. But this idea that doubt is somehow inherently beautiful and good.
Right.
Now, I think doubt's good in the sense that it can lead to inquiry, which can lead to truth.
Yeah.
But in the biblical worldview, you don't want to camp on doubt and celebrate it.
Reveling in your doubt?
You don't want to revel. You don't want to, and try to, inculcate it to others.
Right.
Doubt ultimately is something to be overcome. Although, at the same time, like I said, it's important to air it, to express it, and so you can deal with it.
So is this? Do you think
That's
this
what's
is
stuck
like
in my
a
craw.
pendulum swinging kind of knee-jerk reaction
Absolutely.
to fundamentalism? Of not only are we okay with expressing a doubt, but we're going to live in our doubt.
Yeah, we're going to celebrate the doubt.
We're going to make that a new huddle.
Yeah.
The doubters huddle.
Well, but what he wrote in that blog post is something that we've talked about frequently on this podcast, which is the importance of intellectual inquiry, the importance of critical thinking, to not be frightened by it, to not set up these false dichotomies between faith and science. So my initial reaction when I read that post was, we need to have Michael Gungor, or Michael and Lisa, is that his wife's name?
His name's Lisa.
Lisa
just like my wife.
On the podcast, because I'd love to have a conversation with them. But the big, I don't think his response is going to solve anything.
No,
the way
I don't think it is.
He kind of, the tone of it was not helpful.
I think there might be more Southern Baptist churches canceling their Gungor concerts as a result.
And the psychoanalysis at the end, I think, pushed it over the top.
But
this
here's
is why we do this.
again, kind of like the Driscoll thing. I find the more interesting story is not Driscoll and it's not Gungor. It's why everyone is so up in arms about this.
Yeah.
And I think there was another story we passed around.
I've got it right here. Okay, in ChristandPopCulture.com.
Trying.
Thank you.
Taco is slow today.
Thank you. Some might point out that Gungor is just a musician. He's not a pastor in a church called to preach, teach, and protect the flock. The man is just like everyone else, a flesh and blood guy who thinks, prays, and struggles like the rest of us. So why the blow up? And then this person, I can't remember the name of this person, but they go on. Rick.
No, Derek Rishmami. I can't say his last name.
You're making that up.
Nope.
You're just throwing out random
It sounds made up, doesn't it?
Rich mommy?
No. Derek Rishma. I'm butchering it.
Okay.
I'm butchering it.
Yes.
But his first name's Derek.
Next week, Drew will be issuing an apology to the person who wrote this article.
He's a friend. He's a friend.
Oh, really? Apparently not that close.
Friend who...
Like
Hey,
in
listen,
the Facebook sense of the word?
I'm a little sensitive about last names, so I kind of blocked them out.
Okay, that's good. You can explain that later. The strong reaction partly results from the role that evangelical Christians subconsciously know musicians like Gungor play. They are the church's de facto theologians. The reality is that Gungor isn't just a dude in the pews struggling, but rather he's a part of the folk evangelism Alistair Roberts wrote about the other day. And here's what Alistair Roberts had to say, which is quite interesting because my vegetables pop up in the middle of it.
Get ready to ding.
Ding! There's a sort of evangelical folk religion, much of which is completely unauthorized by pastors or elders. A folk religion driven by such things as TV preachers, purity movements, uninformed theological speculations in democratic Bible studies, chick tracts, that teenage kid who led the dorm prayer meeting at summer camp, Christian kitsch, Kirk Cameron movies, Left Behind books, Veggie Tales, Focus on the Family Literature, blogs, CCM, Answers in Genesis, sappy mass-produced devotional literature, study Bible notes, etc., etc. As people often fail mentally to footnote their beliefs, many attribute the bulk of the weird and wacky things that swam in the rich theological soup of their evangelical upbringing to the church, presuming that it all received the imprimatur of evangelical central headquarters. Have you been there? The lobby is...
I'm pretty sure that's in Colorado Springs, isn't it?
Yeah, it used to be in Wheaton.
It moves.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
It's a traveling feast. Parents are probably the persons with the most to answer for here. Most of the pedagogy of young evangelicals is received from sources other than their pastors.
I would amend that and say,
Please do.
It's not just young evangelicals. I would say all evangelicals.
Evangelicals.
So anybody who's been in pastoral ministry for any length of time knows exactly what this guy is talking about.
What is he talking about?
He's talking about the fact that it is not what the local church pastor teaches, says, or even the denomination endorses. Most of the people sitting in the pews are having their faith shaped by what they experience in popular evangelical culture. It's through the radio, it's through the publishing.
Talk radio,
Exactly.
the book that your friend read. And
Veggie
said, you gotta
Tales,
read
all-
Veggie Tales.
yes.
I have no idea where I came up with that stuff.
So
I
that
read it.
that
I
is
don't know.
really, and so I think the uproar over Gungor is in a sense justifiable because people realize that Gungor and others like Gungor who compose the popular Christian music are really they are the theologians of evangelicalism because
Right.
we don't
No, I
have an
agree with that.
authority structure other than what sells in the Christian bookstore.
We need a pope.
But I don't know what I don't know what his ideal there is. Is
Yeah.
it
Right,
you
what's
just
the
get
answer?
everything from your pastor?
Right.
Because I've
We
seen
got
that too when
wacky
people are
pastors,
like,
too.
exactly,
Yeah.
oh, but Pastor Bob says this, Pastor Bob says that.
And did you hear about Mark Driscoll?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know who I can
So
trust.
I don't know if
There's
that's
another
necessarily a
example
bad
of
thing.
Could I
no
trust?
this is the byproduct, the perhaps side effects of having a very low ecclesiology.
Right.
Yeah.
Now there are other side effects of having a very high ecclesiology.
Can you
Is-
explain the difference? Because that's what Christian would be asking you.
That
if
is
you were
good.
here
So
right now.
a high ecclesiology means a very strong authority structure. So the epitome of
church,
this
view of the church.
is the Roman Catholic Church,
Yeah.
right? Very clear line of authority from the Pope all the way on through.
Right.
Low ecclesiology means there is no higher
It's a free.
authority.
It's me and my Bible.
Exactly.
Me and Jesus, baby.
And so if you have a low
Glenn
ecclesiology, low ecclesiology results in what we're seeing here. High ecclesiology, I mean, the Catholic Church clearly has its problems
The whole
too.
thing can go off the rails together.
Right.
yeah.
So there is no perfect silver bullet model here, but this is, if we want to claim evangelical identity, this is some of the baggage that comes with it.
And do you think, if he had just said, "I don't think the Earth is 6,000 years old," I don't think that would have been as much of an issue as saying, "I don't believe in a historical Adam and Eve."
Well, and you know, the further you get from Genesis
yeah.
1,
Yeah.
the more problematic it gets. So Genesis
Right, and
1
a
is,
flood.
I'm not sure it's a
Right.
6-day creation. People are like, oh, okay. Genesis 2, oh, I'm not so sure about literal Adam and Eve. Then they get a little bit more nervous.
Yeah.
Then you get into Genesis 6 with the flood, and then they're like, okay, wait a minute.
Right,
How far
right.
is this? Are we going to get
Right.
all the way to John 1 here? What's the problem? So,
It's like you're seeing the Bible, like the
Right.
Earth falling away.
which is exactly why Ken Ham and the Answers in Genesis people are going, hey, Genesis 1:1.
Everything.
Let's make the stand
You,
here.
yeah, you
Yeah.
give on Genesis 1:1 and the whole thing unravels.
Is there a way? Because I think this is interesting. Because I've heard like John Walton, who we've had on the show, would say I don't believe in a literal 6-day creation, but I think we need a literal Adam and Eve because it seems to be intimated from Pauline Christology, and the New Testament seems to hold it up as through Adam came sin, through Christ came
Righteousness.
redemption, righteousness. That does Pauline theology fall apart if Adam and Eve become a metaphor? And that's where I would think he's tripped a wire that's much more serious than just the Earth might be older than we think it is.
Yeah, possibly.
And even
Yeah.
more so than because a lot of people would say that are inside the evangelical tent would say you don't necessarily need to assume the Genesis flood was universal. It
Right.
could have been a localized event.
Right.
And that doesn't seem to be outside of evangelical theological bounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No Adam and Eve is a little more serious.
Yeah, but
No.
the interesting thing here is he's not a theologian. He's not a pastor.
Yeah.
He's not a denominational
guitar
leader.
player.
He's a musician and a gifted, really gifted musician.
Yeah.
And so that's what's fascinating.
And yet he is a leader. I agree
Yeah.
with Derek's assessment. And yet one thing
Before you go there,
Yeah.
though, but we didn't ask for his theological views before we published
Right.
him and put him out there and said,
Right.
but somehow we just
We
expected
assume.
him to be
We
one
assume.
of
You're,
in the
you're,
huddle.
You're in the huddle.
In the huddle.
You're in the huddle because, we were all holding hands and praying together.
You know what they say
in the
about
huddle.
you should never assume,
Yeah.
and that's what's
break it down.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So what are you going to
I'm a little confused about that article, though, because he talks about how Christians, and he's absolutely right, are influenced by all these parachurch organizations and the evangelical culture. But all the ones he listed are certainly not liberal. I mean, we're talking about focus on the family.
Right.
I don't think Gungor got any of his
He
his
didn't get 'em from
skepticism
Answers in Genesis.
Yeah, exactly. Skepticism
That's for
about
sure.
the Genesis
Or
account
focus on
from
the family.
VeggieTales, right?
Right.
Okay. So I think that actually probably comes more from the outside culture. I don't want to, invoke the boogeyman here, but
Yeah.
I think that probably comes just from reading science and kind of, going to university, whatever.
Right. So we were at Okoboji. Remember that?
I do.
It was in Iowa.
yeah.
It was in Iowa.
It's fun to say, isn't
And
it?
you taught, Okoboji, Iowa. Which one? Iowa?
Oh, no.
They're both weird words.
Okoboji?
Okay. Okochabugi man. And you taught a class on 10 Commandments for interpreting
yes.
Scripture.
Yes, I did.
And at the end,
The notes are now available on my website, by the way.
fantastic, SkyeJatani.com
Right?
or Meet Skye Taylor. No, that's Christian's website. And at the end, I brought up the point, you're going to give them something to hang on to, right? Because you're taking away all of these, false interpretations
Yeah,
that
popular
we
but
love.
false.
All their life verses.
Yeah, and we got and then I said, so then I asked a question at the end. What resources can you recommend to us, Skye? I was in the audience. So
What podcasts? Is that what you're saying?
And you recommended your website, and I said, well, what about a study Bible? And you said, no, study Bibles have their own point of view.
I didn't say no.
You did.
I
was
said-
like, well,
no,
wait a
I
minute,
said-
you just left them with nothing.
I said I don't use
They
one.
can't even, I don't use one.
Wait,
but
I
if
said
you-
I no, and I said
if you idiots.
No. I said I don't use one, and if you do use one, just no. I didn't say don't.
You didn't say if you.
I said if you do use one, just be aware that the interpretations and the commentary in those study Bibles
Yeah.
are also going to come from a certain point of view, and it's helpful to read multiple points of view. That's what I said. Don't just rely on
But
your
who has
single.
time to read multiple
Well,
points
I'm
of view?
hopefully the people responsible for teaching doctrine and the Bible in the church.
Okay, but that's
See,
not who you were
I
talking
read it in
to.
the original Hebrew and Greek.
Yeah, that's
that way
good.
I don't even have to trust the translators.
Right.
And I think everyone should do the same.
Yeah.
So do you-
right. Even if you don't read Hebrew and Greek, just read the original Hebrew and Greek and trust that the Holy Spirit will form pictures in your mind.
That's right.
Yeah, it's
if you
funny.
don't think you need anyone to read the Bible, just do it in the
Years
originals.
ago, I met a guy who was kind of a lay leader in the church, and he really wanted to be able to read Hebrew and Greek. And so he tried to impress me by reading the Hebrew Bible in proper Hebrew pronunciation. Then I asked him, "Well, what did that mean?" He goes, "I don't know how to translate it. I just know how to read the Hebrew letters
And sound 'em out."
And sound them out." So, it was just kind of weird.
That sounds impressive,
Do you
though.
remember the flap about World Vision, and they were going to
Yeah,
change their whole,
yeah,
and people flipped
yeah.
out about that.
We did.
And it's similar here. It's because it's our
It
parachurch.
was our huddle.
Well, but it's
Our parachurch messed up our huddle.
our parachurch organizations and our kind of celebrity leaders and musicians. They are really the glue that holds evangelicalism together.
Right.
And that's why I
Not
think
like
people.
the Catholic Church.
No.
No.
And so
Pope
when-
is the glue.
when-
See, we need a pope. Who, if we could pick a pope for the evangelical
Pick a
world?
pope?
Oh,
Yeah.
Driscoll's out.
You know who? I'll tell you
I'm gonna go out
who
and
has been that functionally for most of the 20th century
Beth Moore.
was Billy Graham.
Beth Moore. What if we picked a female pope for the evangelical
Ooh,
world?
those
that
shake
would
things
just
up.
be-
That
nuts.
just, wow.
Beth Moore.
Pope S.
I don't think
Since Pope means father, I don't know
Popey?
if
What's-
Beth Moore
well,
would.
Popette, like Smurfette.
Popette.
Popette.
Yeah.
It's a
Doesn't
little-
have the same
a
gravitas.
little blue female pope.
She's already got the hat.
Yeah, she's got a hat.
The white hat.
You know what?
Hat.
Next
Like a
podcast, you're going to have
nurse's
to
hat.
apologize to Beth Moore now.
I'm
Why?
gonna apologize. And Smurfette.
And Smurfette, yeah.
It's messed up, man.
Very.
So it's okay to use study Bibles? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm just saying be aware that
I
when
came
you
away from Okoboji thinking that...
you weren't listening carefully. I said if you use one, just be aware that
you
it's a
must
single
use
point
one.
of view and you should be reading multiple rather than just one.
Yeah.
And the notes on the side are not scripture.
That's true.
That's what my seminary prophet's like. Yeah, you got your student Bible.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
He's okay.
Not the
Well,
same.
can I say I like the ESV Study Bible?
Yeah.
Can I say that?
Yeah, it's good.
And
It's
what
good.
I like is that when we get to controversial passages, when I'm in the ESV Study Bible, it will say, here's the 3 main ways that people interpret that.
And that's a
And then
good-
I don't have to read multiple sources.
See, I think that's actually a really respectable way to do it.
Yeah.
There are other study Bibles that just simply say, here's what this means,
Yeah.
end of story, and people go, oh, okay, great.
Right.
And they don't realize
Usually
it.
when the study Bible is named after someone.
Yeah.
Won't mention any names.
Yes.
Rary? Is that one? The Rary Study
What are
Bible?
you trying to...
Rary?
Ryrie.
Ryrie?
Ryrie?
Ryrie.
Ryrie?
Yeah.
Or others.
I don't know who
There are
Ryrie?
others.
Ryrie? Okay, I'm going to sing something. I have a hunger to listen to some music from Michael Gungor, but I'm wondering about his personal beliefs. Is he the one that should be the chief of my theology or my biology? He's thinking about science, and that makes me a little queasy. But if you have booked him to come to your church, still have him come. Don't leave him in the lurch, 'cause he's probably not going to sing a song about how Adam and Eve are figments of your imagination. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. See you next week. Thanks, Dyck.
Woo!
Wow.